Well, we're back once again. Can we start over?
No.
Welcome to What's Going On. My name's Kanenhariyo. I'm your host. These two wonderful gentlemen here can introduce themselves because on this show, people introduce themselves.
I'm Tom Keefer with the Two Row Times.
And I'm Jonathan Garlow, also with the Two Row Times.
Mm-hmm. All right, for those of you who are just joining into the show, a very quick recap. I was traveling from my home community of Kanenhariyo. I'm a Mohawk, and I was traveling here to Six Nations where I live. And in my possession, I had a tobacco product that was manufactured by my people and in my possession and mine. And within a routine pullover, I had 150 cases of Kanenhariyo cigarettes seized from me, and I was given a $629,000 fine, and they're asking for 6 months of jail, the province. And I challenging the province in that we have a treaty relationship with the Crown, that they were a sovereign, separate people, and I've asked the Crown to address the matter in accordance to the Silver Covenant chain, and the Crown has said to me they didn't have the tools to do so. So this show is following a case as this progresses and opens up for a constitutional question regarding our Crown relationship. There you go.
Has there been any new developments then? Fill me in. I don't have
Okay.
no idea.
Yeah, there has been.
Since our last show, I haven't talked to you.
Yeah, there's been some new developments. So I had court in a couple of weeks ago, and so originally they had said that I could apply for legal aid, and they give me all the forms and all the paperwork, and said that I would need to find a best lawyer I could find, and that their office would have the obligation and responsibility to pay for the legal the legal costs related to fighting a constitutional question. And so I was feeling sort of confident about that. So I called every single Aboriginal law firm in Ontario, and then I spread out across the country as many as I could find, and every one of them turned me down. So I was feeling a little stressed about that. They turned me down because most of them said to me that it was a huge case, and that they didn't take on individuals, they didn't take on legal aid, and they basically only represented First Nation bands. I've got a problem with that because the First Nations bands, the Indian Act bands, aren't sovereign, and they don't have any treaties. They're just a form of the federal government administrative system. So I finally...
They don't have any real trees.
No, they don't.
Some of the numbered guys...
way out in the west. Okay, well, in our world, that's not the case.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, the Indian Act system was imposed on the Haudenosaunee people in and around 1924 unilaterally across all of our communities, and it was done so with the use of the RCMP and the military. There were deaths, and then there were arrests as they rounded up our traditional government system and imposed a new system of government that was regulated by them under the Indian Act. Purely illegal.
And maybe one thing to add, and just in terms of the update of what is going on, is that there's been a lot of movement on the legal front in terms of those band councils, and particularly the band councils that are organized as the Iroquois Caucus. So those are the Haudenosaunee band councils, or the band councils that are comprised or made up in Haudenosaunee territory. And there was a big meeting that we were at in Kanenhariyo last night, in which the band council there was presenting that the caucus is planning a legal challenge to Bill C-10, and they are proposing a regulatory system, an alternative regulatory system, so that tobacco be, I guess, regulated and potentially taxed by the band councils. and they're proposing an alternative regulatory framework than the Canadian system. But the question is then how alternative is that? Mm-hmm. If it's still, is it still within the Canadian system?
Yeah, they've got that meeting on January 22nd. They're going to hear from I think it's Gowlings as to what their thoughts are on a legal position regarding treaty right and Aboriginal right, Section 35. Am I talking too quiet? All right. So regarding the update, so what happened after I had contacted every Aboriginal law firm across the country and they all said no, I was feeling a little stressed. And I finally found two law firms that were interested to take on the case. One said that they didn't accept legal aid. They'd need a $5,000 retainer and $400 an hour. And I was like, well, okay. I don't know how I can possibly do that. And then the other law firm, small law firm, they've done lots of pro bono work. They said they would take it on. And they said they would take it on with legal aid, and so they said let's move forward. So I then went to legal aid office in Hamilton, and brought my paperwork, and they wouldn't accept my paperwork. They just slid it back across the table at me and said, "Sorry, you won't be accepted for legal aid. You'll have to go talk to duty counsel or something and see what you can do about it." So I left, and I was like, what? They said that it would be, I had the obligation. I don't understand. So I called the lawyer, and I said, what's up? What's with this? And he says, well, you can appeal. And I said, well, they didn't even accept. He said, did you get a letter saying that you weren't accepted? And I said, no, they didn't accept my paperwork in the first place. So he says, well, go see duty counsel. Of course, I don't even know what duty counsel is. My world is our world, in Kanenhariyo and the Longhouse and Council of the Clans and all that sort of stuff. And so I'm not that familiar with their system. So I thought to myself, well, maybe this guy's just racist, and he just didn't want to have to deal with it, so he wouldn't even process the paperwork to even allow me to get denied. So I decided, well, I'll go into Brantford, and I'll apply there. I'm like, this is logical to me. So I go over there, and I explained to the lady what transpired, and she was appalled. She said that should have never happened. They should have accepted the paperwork and processed it and whatever. And if you didn't get accepted, then you'd get a letter within 10 days saying so. And so now I'm convinced this guy is just a racist, right?
Yeah, it's sad we weren't on scene with even
it would have been nice.
Camera.
Yeah, it would have been nice. Unfortunately, I had 3 instances where I went, and also when I went to court, and I didn't have anybody with me. I was alone. So after this, hopefully we can move forward and have at least something to capture what's happening. So she told me though that I had to file it at Hamilton at the court where it's happening. So I was like, oh no. So I went back, and I talked to my lawyer, and he said, well, you have to appeal it. And so I said, all right, well, I don't know how I'm going to appeal it when I wasn't denied, actually physically denied with legal writing. So I decided, well, I would just go and try again. So I went back to the legal aid office in Hamilton, and I snuck around, looked around the corner to see if it was the same guy at the counter, and it was. I was like, oh no. So I was like, how am I gonna, so I'm like, all right, how am I gonna deal with this? So I'm like, all right, well, just get at it. So I marched right in there, right? Put all my paperwork down hard on the table like that, and I said, I want to appeal this. And he says, oh, okay. I'm like, what? The last time I said I want to apply, and you said no. This time I say I want to appeal, and you say, oh yeah, okay. Well, let's fill out the paperwork then. He gets the forms out. So I'm like, I don't understand these people. This is crazy. So he starts filling out the forms, asking me questions, and then he asked me about how I make a living, and I said, well, I'm a stay-home dad. I do a little bit of consulting work and the odd job here and there. He says, so you're self-employed? And I said, well, yeah, I guess so. And then he says, oh, well, I can't fill out the paperwork then. You need to call these people. He gives me a card. He says, and you'll have to appeal with them. Have a nice day. So I walk out, and again, I've got no paperwork. I haven't been denied, well, I have been. Now I'm trying to appeal, and now I can't appeal. I got to try these other people. Well, then the whole Christmas time happens, and New Year's and all that, and everything's closed. So
I think I should just mention that that's why Native people don't do very well in their system, because all of that stuff you're talking about, I'm allergic to all of that.
Yeah, me too.
I don't mess with that.
No, I tend not to either, but I was trying to deal with this, right?
And I'm thinking that there's also people who'll be watching who are thinking, like, they're fairly educated on our ways, and they're saying, like, as soon as you enter into their system, you're screwed.
Yeah. And lots of people have said that to me. But at the same time, I'm in a situation where if I don't do anything, I'm equally screwed, right? So I've got to defend myself somehow. So I get the number and I call the number, talk to the guy, and I'm actually like, it's the day that I'm getting to go. I got to get to court, and I'm finally get through to someone, and I wait on the phone for an hour and a half. They put me on hold for an hour and a half. I wait. Finally, the guy answers, and so I explained that I've been denied and that I wanted to appeal. And he said, "Have you ever called this office before?" And I said, "No." And then he said, "Well, how could you have possibly been denied if you hadn't called us?" And I'm like, so I explained that, the guy wouldn't accept my paperwork, said I wouldn't be accepted for legal aid, and so on. And so he says, "Well, just because some guy doesn't accept your paperwork doesn't mean you're denied." I'm like, I really don't get you guys. The whole system's just total confusion to me. So I'm like, okay, so can I make this application? He's like, yep. He said, no problem. So let's we can do it over the phone. And I said, okay. So he's asking me questions, and I'm answering the questions, and then he asked me how much my wife makes. And I said, well, I don't know. I'm like, it's not my business. That's her affairs. In our world, we're separate. She's doing her thing, and I'm doing mine, and we're raising kids up or whatever. But I said, I don't know. I'm guessing probably around 60,000. She's a teacher. She's working, Grand Area District School Board. He says 60,000. You figure? I said, yeah, it's got to be around there. He says, well, you definitely make too much money for legal aid. He says, you're denied. And I said, well, wait a minute, that's her money, not my money. And he said, well, you're married, it applies to you both. Oh, I see. I said,
she makes nothing then.
Yeah. so there I go. So there I'm denied. And then I get an email from the lawyer that says, oh, by the way, since you were didn't get legal aid, I'm not retained by you, and I won't be in court with you on this day. So basically, good luck. So I was like, okay, great. So I'm going back to court. I was supposed to have a lawyer. I was supposed to have the legal aid stuff, and the lawyer had actually promised the Crown that it was going to work out, and we're just waiting on the paperwork. So now everything's unraveled, right? So I'm like, what the hell? So I drive to the courthouse, and I'm stressing. I'm like, judge's gonna be mad.
And you told us the wrong day.
Yeah, you told us it was Wednesday, so we organized the whole shoot for it.
Well, it was.
Then you told us the day before it was Tuesday, and we're like, we got a paper to make.
Well, the date that they gave me initially, that's what it was, and then it got changed. So, anyways, so I go to the court, and I'm by myself. And I've just been told, no, you're absolutely not. You've exhausted all avenues, and you're not getting that. You're not getting any help. And
I'm laughing, but this is a horror story.
Well, yeah, it is. So I walk in. It turned out not so bad. So I walked in, and I'm standing there in amongst a bunch of people, and this strange woman comes walking up to me, and she says, "Are you Supple Ford?" And I said, "Yeah." She says, "Well, I'm the Crown Attorney for today." And I'm thinking to myself, how'd she pick me up out of the crowd? And she says, I'm thinking, they must have pictures of me while they're sitting talking or whatever. I don't know.
File.
Yeah, whatever.
I'm screwing you.
yeah. She says the lady that ordinarily was supposed to be here, she had to do something else, so they sent me. And she said, you're the only case that I have today on this issue. So we've asked the court to put it first. We're going to hear it first and get it dealt with. And she says, so are you ready? Blah, blah, blah. So I explained to her what I just said to you. I told her the whole story. Yeah. She says, oh, she doesn't know what to do. I said, she says, well, how about we agree to come back in a month and we move forward from there. And I said, all right, well, we can do that. So that sounds reasonable. She said, all right, well, that should give you enough time. I said, yeah, I think so. And I said, at least to figure something out. So we go in there, and she says, well, when they call up your name, just come up. So they call my name, and they constantly call Seth Lafort. This is my English name. Mm-hmm. And every time I go in there, I correct them. I say, my name's Kanenhariyo. And so they did again, and I go up there, and I'm frustrated with it. So the Crown talks, and she says, you know, we're moving forward. We're asking the court to set this aside for a month. January 3rd, or sorry, February 3rd, and then she says some word I think she said it was in probate, but she didn't say that word when she was talking to me in the hallway. So the judge says, are you agreeable to that? And I said, well, do I have an option? And he says, well, yeah. I said, well, what are they? And then and I said, and what does that mean, that word she said? And then he explained it. Well, that means whether you got a lawyer or not, then we move forward. And he says, is that enough time? I said, well, 2 months would be better. And so he says, and now she's mad. I'd seen her face turn red. Yeah. But she was kind of being sneaky, because she said, you know, we get together and not she's going to plow forward whether I got a lawyer or not, and got me to try to agree to it.
A Crown attorney being sneaky?
Funny thing, eh? So so the judge kind of come back and forth, and he says, well, would you be agreeable to come back in a month to kind of to give us an update as to where things are at, and then we can set another date? I said, yeah, that's workable for me. So that's where things are. I'm at the stage where I have no lawyer, I have no financial support, I have no legal aid, and in a month from now, I gotta give them an update as to what I'm up to and how things are proceeding.
You got a TV show.
But I got a TV show, and so I'm trying to brainstorm how to do this, right?
Did you do like the little bow when you went through like the little gate part, the fence?
No.
You did it?
No. And I had my hands in my pockets, and the judge says, get your hands out of your pockets. So I took one out. I would just say, you need to resist a little bit, right?
Get your hands out of your pockets.
Yeah, come down here with the rest of us. Yeah, so.
Are you aware of the Freeman stuff?
Yeah, except that doesn't apply to us. Mm-hmm. We've got this other thing that's called sovereign.
Well, what they do is they open the door a crack. They don't even come in the courtroom. They kind of just put their neck out and they talk from there. Like, have you seen that style?
I've heard people talk about and do those sort of things, that I've watched guys sit in jail for 10 months at a time, and I'm not interested in that, you know. Maybe that is an avenue for people that are wrapped up inside their system, in their world, as subjects of the Crown, or as, you know, but we're not those things. So for me, those attempts or applications, I think, are irresponsible and silly for us to move in that direction when we're clearly sovereign people.
Now, how fluent are you in your Ganike?
Ganike? Well,
because you can chat with people?
Yeah, I can chat. I mean, I wouldn't call myself an affluent speaker or anything like that. I got lots to learn. It's a huge language, but yeah, I can. If I got dropped off in the Kanenhariyo world, I could get a bite to eat and grab a room and rent a car, and yeah, I could do what I needed to do.
Because there's some people who say that sovereignty is like really connected with language, and so has anyone like from your nation counseled you on just speaking only in Mohawk in the court? That's a pretty sovereign move. Well, might be too late now if they know that you know English, but
yeah. It would seem to me that that move, although it does present a level of sovereignty, it really is more of in my perception, a tactic to stall the courts. And a tactic to try to get them to maybe pay for a translator or those sort of things. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really address the issues of our relationship. And it doesn't address, it creates a language barrier where communication is difficult. So I think it's important to utilize our language when we're talking about legal apparatuses. So, you know, oreguasa, that's the our word for the silver covenant chain, or juhade, the turo. And in those contexts, I think it's important, but I don't think it's necessarily important to encumber the dialogue with a language barrier when it's not necessary. At the same time, though, what I have talked to people about, and in previous things that I've been involved in, and maybe we could talk about that, is I've utilized a lawyer not as a representative, but rather as a translator, because legal language has a specific meaning, and what I mean, we speak our own dialect of English. We do. And the way we use the English language, it doesn't necessarily reflect how it's used in the court system and what it means in a legal sense. So I've in the past utilized a lawyer not as a representative of anybody, but rather as a translator to understand what they're talking about.
Because you got a situation where the legal structure is so based upon, it's actually based upon, with all these Latin terms, which are all based on how the Roman Empire used to govern its, you know, at the time what it thought was the global empire, all with this entire language and legal system that was developed and is now applicable in various ways through through the English system.
It's called Argot.
Argot?
ARGOT, where it's like a language within a language, and it's meant to be sneaky.
Well, that's what it is, right? So I've been contemplating how do I proceed forward, and so with the show, this is giving me a bit of an opportunity to flush this stuff out and to bring in other people and to talk to them and get their thoughts and their ideas, and so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to bring in, hopefully bring in some different minds throughout Iroquois, I know, and to hear what their thoughts are regarding our relationship and regarding how this stuff should be dealt with. Because, like we had said, we've had numerous conversations in the past. How would this be looking like if this had happened in 1650, right? And we'd be fighting, you know. That's what happened.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we have the silver covenant chain and the two-row in terms of bonding that relationship and setting terms out about how to deal with conflict. Because without the mechanisms to deal with conflict, then when two sovereigns don't have a mechanism to deal with it, then they go to war.
Can you guys flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, there's two things I want to say. There's two things I want to say at this juncture. Number one,
I didn't know we were at a juncture.
Number one, I think that there's a myth in Canada that's perpetuated by the Canadian state that all the real Indians are dead.
Yeah.
Or they're all gone.
Yeah.
And that the people in Six Nations are just kind of pretending to
they're
be native.
They're the heirs of the Six Nations people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a myth.
And so that's why I say if you're speaking fluent Ganikihaga, it blows that myth right out of the water. There's a guy, he's not just making up a language. That's a real language that's 20,000 years old. We don't understand it, but we have to hire someone who does. And secondly, seems to me that what you're going through right now, just think of how many people have gone through that and just been like obliterated, like in the last 100 years, just because it seems like we don't have our sovereignty, but we really do. I think that we could prove in court that we still have our sovereignty. We never lost it in any way. And there's people who say, "Oh, you guys lost a war." Number one, we didn't lose a war. Number two, even if we did, we're still sovereign. Because you lose a war doesn't make you lose your sovereignty. Germany lost. There's no discussions on that. They're no longer a country because they lost World War II. You know, there's still a country. There'll always be a country.
And we have never gave up our sovereignty or decided to abandon our constitution and our laws and our system to join Canada. We're not Canadians.
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, because of residential school and because of the 60 scoop and now the Millennium Scoop regarding CAS and stealing away kids and displacing them and essentially creating a brainwashing situation in many cases where these people grow up and not know who they are, not know who their people are, and those sort of things, erasing the mind essentially. Creates a body of people that may think that they're apart, but the fact of the matter is that even that isn't a legitimate act of people joining another and becoming a part of that, Canada. That's just genocide. That's just forcing one group of people to become part of another and separating from the group. The fact is that Canada cannot provide any evidence that we relinquished our rights and relinquished our sovereignty to them, and nor did we relinquish our land.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the real deal, right?
It's an odd thing where they would say that we're living in a fantasy land. When it's them.
It's them.
They're living,
they're living in a fantasy
of their own creation.
Yeah. So I've had a little experience of there's some people I've been talking about this, and people are like, "Well, good luck with that," and that sort of thing. I put a lot of energy and thought into how to go about this. I'm not just a bumbling idiot trying to, and I'm not just trying to find some way out of it. I'm very curious and I'm very interested to know whether or not we're still friends. It's very simple. If we're still friends and we're still allies, and the renewed allied relationship that was as recent as 2010 with the Queen coming with those silver bells and offering it to the Mohawks and reaffirming our silver covenant relationship of friendship since 1710. If that's over since 2010 till now, then we're enemies. It doesn't mean we're no longer sovereign. It means we're no longer friends. Mm-hmm. And in our world and in our laws, there's not really neutrality. You're either friends or you're not friends. And when you're not friends, then you're enemies. We just need to have that cleared up because they're operating currently on the premise that we're Canadians. And that we're Canadian Indians somehow, and we've got some limited sovereignty, and in some cases, if we can prove it, and then they'll give us a right or two. But it's exactly the opposite. It's us that gave them some rights and some limited expression of sovereignty. And so,
can you expand on that last point? How did you give Canada? How did you give Canada rights?
How did we give Canada? Well, we gave. My understanding is that the basis of our relationship is a trade relationship. That when the Dutch first came, we established a relationship with them, and we wanted to have a trade partnership, and we created a rope. We talk about this hemp rope, and we tied to each other, and that if either one needed to get the other's attention, we could pull on it. And what our old people said was that they tied the rope to some bushes so that their boat wouldn't float away. And so we keep them nearby and help them to stay nearby here, and have a relationship with us, and we traded goods and so on. When the French came, we established an iron chain, and then when the British came, they wanted even a better deal. They wanted an even stronger relationship with us, and they wanted a permanent one, one that could be ended. They wanted to be here. And so they approached us with the Silver Covenant and a chain that would be strong and solid, and that if it became tarnished, that we could set on and polish it, we could brighten it if there became issues. If we look at the Royal Proclamation in 1763, the king's telling his subjects, this is the relationship that we have. They're a separate people. You're my subjects. Those are Indians. that's their territory, and you can't just go and buy it or go and have dealings with them over their land. You've got to. I have to buy it from them first. I have to negotiate the terms of that and make a treaty to that effect, and then you can be there. Although, as we were looking at this morning, the Royal Proclamation 1763 also it's for them. It's not us. It's for the subjects of the crown. Said you can have free trade with the Indians, open free trade with the Indians. We're not going to interfere. That's what the Royal Proclamation says, and so a lot of times there's this belief that these treaties, this relationship is about the rights of the Indians, but it's not. It's about the rights of the Canadians.
Yeah, I think something that, like, to answer Tom's question really simply, like, you had it's so obvious, it's right in front, and it's so obvious that it's left unstated, but this is our house.
Yeah.
And their tenants. I think that's been so, like, we've neglected to mention that, just super plain like that.
Yeah, yeah. This
and
is our house.
It's so obvious. It's natural law. It's legal. It's almost goes without saying that, you know, you go to someone's land, it's theirs. And I think that it's the doctrine of discovery that kind of obscures that, because if we go back into that time, they weren't sure if we were really humans or not because of their doctrine of discovery, which said that we didn't have souls. So when you put it in context like that, they must have been maybe split on whether we had souls or not. Maybe some of them thought we did, and there was others who were more religious who were like, no, the Pope says they don't.
Yeah, I guess they couldn't say that, but they also couldn't say that you had turned your back on Jesus, because they were like, these are a whole new group of people we didn't know exist, so we can't, you know, they had a dilemma about that.
Well, the Spanish didn't have much of a dilemma.
No, the Spanish
They're
did.
like, these guys don't have souls, our Pope says they don't, kill them and we'll get a better resurrection.
Yeah, but that's not how the British that's not how the British or the French perceived it, and so the application of the right of God for them to just come in and take lands doesn't apply here. It doesn't apply in Iroquois because
well, it doesn't apply.
It doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. Period. It's just that's.
But
nonsense.
especially with us.
Well, particularly with us, especially with us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the sort of trade and treaty relations that we have, and we would have just killed them all. Let's just face the facts.
Yeah.
They actually were not in a position to be able to militarily overrun us. That's why they needed to have an allied relationship with us, and they didn't have the skills or ability to survive in this territory, in this land, or to develop the resources that they wanted access to without us either. Period.
Yeah. And all of the scholars and any historians will point out over and over again that you guys had a kind of balance. That you had the balance of power in Eastern North America, and the French would try to get you on side against the English would try to get you on side against the French. There were diplomatic relationships. There were all kinds of treaties that were going back and forth. And on the kind of question of Canada's constitutionality or Canada's limited sovereignty, it's important, I think, to note that the Canadian Constitution itself limits the capacity of the Canadian government or the Canadian people to impose upon Indigenous peoples by saying, well, you can't do things that violate or that go against these, that go against quote unquote Aboriginal right.
You mean the charter?
Or the treaties? Yeah, the charter. It's in Section 35.
Well, if we look at the Nanfan 1701 Nanfan agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the French, and the Haudenosaunee and the British, the Americans at Albany, it's the British, and all of the other players that were involved in those agreements, the Anishinaabe and Algonquins and so on. We essentially offer to them the ability to establish castles in our hunting territory for garrison, and to assist in the protection of that hunting territory. That's Southern Ontario. We didn't sign off. It's not an agreement to sell them our land. All of Southern Ontario is Kanenhariyo. It's our territory, and we only afforded them the ability to set up castles, military bases. That's it, and it's been argued and reaffirmed that that 1701 treaty is applicable, and that the provincial, one of the things that talks about in there, that we have a free, sort of unmolested hunting and fishing access in this territory, and it not be interrupted. So we were maintaining that this is going to continue to be our breadbasket, our hunting territory, fishing territory, and we didn't relinquish or give up our sovereignty in that land or our responsibility to this territory, and we also extended it to all the other parties to the Dishes One Spoon, and the old people that I grew up with talked about being the beaver bowl, and that we were all going to eat from this thing. So.
Yeah, there's
so you asked about this. Well, how did we extend some limited sovereignty to the Crown? Well, we told the Crown, you can put some castles up there, and your people can live over there, and you can use the land to the depth of the plow. We extended some limited access to use of our hunting territory to the Crown and her subjects. And if you look at what fee simple title is, it's essentially to the depth of the plow. You don't own the minerals underneath it. You don't fully outright own it. That's what we offered the Queen. The Queen isn't the royal family, who's the sovereign over the British subjects, and Canada being a monarchy with the Queen being their queen. We extended some limited sovereignty to them over their own people in sort of some fee simple title, in essence, of use in our lands. That's all.
So, I guess to bring this full circle,
yeah.
Do the guys who you're talking to at the Hamilton court know any of this stuff? That's probably the real question. It seems like when you're there's no time to talk. But if they could hear all of this, they'd have to agree, or maybe you could get scholars on your behalf instead of lawyers. They call up a witness, Professor so-and-so to the stand.
And I think, too, that point that you were making earlier, John, about what was it like back in 1810 or 1750 or 1650, and all of those points, right? And up until 1812, there would be no argument from anybody that the Haudenosaunee were not a sovereign people. They were there. That was, I think, pretty clearly evident there. So what would have happened if you were back in those days and you were bringing some tobacco from one Haudenosaunee community to another, and the British Crown, an agent of the British Crown stopped you and said, "Hey, what do you got in your bag there? Let me see what's in your bag," as you're traveling from Kanenhariyo to Six Nations on a trade route as your people did. What did those economic relations look like, and did the Crown try to extend sovereignty in those times over your trading relationship between different Ogohongwe nations, or even any trading relationships with British subjects and Ogohongwe people? I don't know if you have the, maybe that's a question for the historians, or to get into specifics, but I think it's one that should be posed.
We're probably running a little long in the tooth here.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
But there's more to talk about, obviously.
There definitely is more to talk about. In the next episode, I would like to flush out and talk about my experience in polishing the chain, and some of the things that my home community and my clan family, because we're talking about the real deal, and yeah, it's the real deal in terms of your clan family and the responsibility and the sovereignty of your clan and the individuals in your clan and your clan mother, and that process, and addressing the Crown on these small issues when it's about an individual and what has already happened. So I keep running into this, people going, "Well, good luck," but to be quite honest with you, I've seen on a number of cases where what's transpired is the Crown has gone in before a judge and said, "Your Honor, we've polished the chain, we're friends again, and we'll drop all the charges." And I personally seen that, and it was a matter of sitting down with dialogue and discussing and finding a solution, and a clan family being involved with the individuals, and the Crown sitting down, and the Crown sort of been given enough of a historical knowledge base and the places to go and to do the personal research to be able to realize that this, in fact, relationship is existing here. And so what's happening is I'm approaching the Crown saying, well, I want to dress like this. There's already precedent set. There's already those things in place. It's not a matter of anything other than this Crown is saying, well, I don't have the tools to do so. Take it to a higher court and make the judge order me to do it that way. So
seems like you might need to know like R versus the Crown or whatever. Or
yeah. There currently isn't one of those, right? There hasn't been a case where it was fought to say the judge said you have this treaty and Crown, you need to follow this. What's happened instead is there's been a willingness on a couple of Crown attorneys to do it in this process, and so there isn't a court case that determined it. And so this Crown is saying to me, make this court case so that this gets solved this way. I don't know necessarily if that's the smartest or the best approach. I think there needs to be some more dialogue, and we'll see what happens in the next stage of things, because my understanding, and I may be a little bit mixed up about this, but an application gets put towards for a constitutional question, and then they have to accept it. You can't just question anything and then they just say, oh, okay, let's have the court about it. Now, you put your application in as to the question that you're raising, and then the courts decide whether or not they're willing to accept that as a reasonable question. So my questioning the sovereignty of Canada in terms of its supreme supremacy over the Dominion of Canada, and that not include us, because of our treaty relationship that they're obligated to follow, may not even be accepted. And so it'll be interesting to see where things transpire.
If I was them, I wouldn't accept it.
No, of course
not. If I had the choice.
Yeah.
Should I allow this? No, not going to allow it.
No, not going to allow it.
And what you're saying in the other cases is that there's been questions where you've seen this brought up before around the Silver Covenant chain, and rather than the Crown actually fighting it out and having to do the historical research and having it be appealed and answer these constitutional questions, they've said, well, we're as a Crown individual, we're willing to have essentially what they would consider an alternative dispute resolution or a polishing of the chain, and then the matter just gets kind of struck from the court. The charges are withdrawn and life continues.
Yeah, and I've seen that, and so people are saying, "Oh, good luck," and I'm saying, "Well, I've seen it before," and that is the treaty relationship.
The question is, will they do it on such a high-profile case around tobacco, especially in the context of what's happening with Bill C-10 and the ways that that's being argued out? And I don't know if it's worth mentioning anything about what's going on with Bill C-10 or what your sense as a resident from Kanenhariyo is in having been at that meeting last night.
Well, I mean, it was very clear that what was told to the band council was that go tell Ottawa that we're prepared to fight over this, and come here first before you go anywhere else. Let's get it on. I mean, that was it was very clearly said. There's some arguments. There's some people who've raised some arguments regarding, like, well, should look at Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution, and we've got an Aboriginal right because. You've got to prove that you did something prior to a white man arrival or European contact, and so the argument that Indigenous people, and particularly the Kanenhariyo and Haudenosaunee people, practiced in the growing and raising and processing of tobacco prior to European contact, and then upon European contact they engaged in trade with the Europeans as well, continued to engage in trade with the others. But my problem with that is that those arguments degrade our sovereignty, because it's saying they're asking Canada to acknowledge they're having a right within the context of Canada. That's silly, and it's extremely difficult argument to make. It's much easier to argue that we've got a treaty relationship, and there's volumes and volumes and volumes over hundreds of years of reference to this treaty relationship, and the context in which it's established and how to address complex issues as recently as 2010. It's a no-brainer in terms of which direction to be able to deal with this. It's not a matter of what's the new legislation going to be. It's a matter of how are we going to get along with one another or not get along. And so that's my thoughts about that. And so, I mean, even with the Iroquois Caucus, and they're trying to move forward and trying to find a regulatory system or whatever. Even that, it's not addressing the real issue here, that we're a separate people. That this implementing and this application of regulations over top of the Haudenosaunee is wrong.
I think we should be viewed as like the most pro-Canadian, non-Canadian society in the world. Because as soon as you bring this up, people will think of Quebec and they think, oh, you guys are anti-Canadian.
No.
How dare you call yourselves not? How dare you say you're not a Canadian? You must be anti-Canadian. You know, and there's that huge gap of middle ground that they just jump completely over.
Yeah, totally.
But in history, you know, they say that you know a tree by its fruits. You look at our fruits, the stuff that we put up with, the way that we set up Canada, the way that we helped the British through thick and thin, stayed and stuck by their side despite being crapped upon. We're like the most pro-Canadian, non-Canadian people in the world.
We're like helping along and like, let's work this out and find a solution. And we're so pro-peace, right? Yeah,
but there's thousands of us dying at Queenston Heights. You know, we might as well have been waving a little flag while we're blood spilling out and guts pouring. Mm-hmm. You know, we were there. We've backed up our words and our treaties with our actions.
Yep.
We have this huge history of honoring our ally relationship with the Crown. And then we get treated like this.
Yeah.
Hey, that tobacco, what are you doing? Give me that, you're going to jail.
Yeah.
It's so disrespectful.
Well, it is extremely disrespectful. But I guess there's a part of me that thinks about it this way, that it's not their fault. They don't know any better. There has not been enough energy put by the education system to properly educate the general Canadian public as to what their rights are and what their relationship is here in this land with us and to this land. And so for me, I don't get upset feeling like, hey, you're crapping on me again. I'm like, it's a shame that you don't know anything, and we're gonna have to give you some education so that you really understand what's going on here, because for 100 years you've been committing a genocide and thought you're done with it, and it's not over. And that genocide was committed against us, but at the same time, there was a brainwashing of the general Canadian public to wipe us of their memory and to wipe the relationship from their memory. And so, you know, it's even like the police officer that's handing me the fines, and I'm saying to him as he's handing them to me, you don't have the right to do that to me. And he says to me, I'm not a lawyer. He's like, I'm not a historian, I'm just a police officer. This is what he said to me. And he said, I think you should fight this and win. He said, and get your stuff back. It doesn't make a difference to me. You didn't hurt anyone. Yeah. That's what he says to me. Because he doesn't know any better. He's like, I'm just doing my job, basically, you know.
Following orders.
But yeah, I'm just following orders. That's the Third Reich said, though, too.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out too well for them either.
But anyways, guys, thanks for watching.
Yeah. So that's a wrap. We're gonna close up our episode this week. It's been a long few days actually. And our next time we get together, hopefully we'll have somebody on the show and we can talk about this further, and maybe by then we can have a further update of what's happening with the court case, and who knows, maybe we'll have a lawyer on by then. So take care, everyone.
Okay.
Peace.
Una.
Skana.